All right, it is 7 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. Mary Ann, would you call the roll, please?
Mary Ann Baker's here. Sarah Murray. John Kerr.
Here.
Rhonda Kiesling. Here. David Nallner.
Here.
David Thomas.
Here.
Carol Pruitt. Mark Swaffer.
Here.
Thomas Harper.
Here.
Sam Edwards.
Here.
8 present, 2 absent.
Okay, we do have a quorum to carry on the meeting tonight. So we will get right into our old business. First item under old business is a request by our planning staff to amend the Trousdale County zoning resolution, section 5.041D, to add mining activities and related services as a special exception. We have been discussing this now for, I know, the last 2 meetings, and our staff has been researching this. Oh, the minutes. Okay, we'll make a reverse thing. Mr. Nallner has called to my attention very well. I have forgotten the minutes. Won't take but a second. Everyone has had a copy of last month's minutes. Does anybody have any questions or any comments or any changes or corrections that need to be made? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes for last month.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Nallner. Do I hear a second? Second by Mr. Harper. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Minutes do pass. Now we will get into our mining activities and related services that could be used as a special exception. Since our staff has been working on this now for a couple of months, Sam, would you like to go first on this, or do I need to go to Mary?
Just go to Mary.
Okay, Mary.
So I had spoken with a few peer communities on this, had some meetings with them, and asked for some guidance and understanding on issues that they'd run into in siting quarries, what best practices existed, what kind of issues the community saw with the sites, as well as just some logistical things and how they're defining specific uses, and where they're putting them in their zoning districts and what criteria they're looking at and reviewing them. I have some really good notes from that, and I'm hoping to get kind of a draft of a resolution or draft regulations to you all in the next 2 weeks from that meeting. So just an update. I don't have anything additional to present that we haven't already talked about this evening.
Okay. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we will have a draft resolution on where to add mining activities and related services in our current zoning. Sam, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
The last time we spoke about the three zoning districts. It was 2 that was presented, and I request that we add the extra zoning district. Mary's being very diligent and trying to get the best information possible from surrounding counties that deal with mining. So hopefully at the next meeting, we will have a proposal that we can look at and hopefully send forward. Thank you.
Okay. For those in attendance that are wondering about maybe the process for this, when our staff brings forward some resolutions, this one happens to be for mining activities, which most of us would refer to as rock quarries, things like that. Currently, they don't exist in our zoning regulations, which gives us no way to control or manage them whatsoever. And we need to make sure that we can do that. So staff would bring a draft proposal, as you've heard Mary say, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. We would discuss that next month. Anyone with any ideas or any suggestions about this would need to be at next month's meeting in order to be heard on that issue. The Planning Commission would look at that, make any changes, accept it, whatever we need to do. And then we would send that with our approval if it passes, this body to the county commission, the county commission being the only body in the county that can make resolutions. All we do is follow the rules set by the county commission. We do send them with our approval or our disapproval sometimes, but it's the final decision is left up to the county commission. All right, anybody have any comments about that? Hopefully we'll get that in a couple of weeks and we can get this in our regulations so that we don't get surprised with this at any time in the future. I'm sorry?
I'd like to elaborate on that.
Sure.
So we do have a portion in the county ordinance that states mining activities. Our concern, and to elaborate on what John was saying, our concern is there is no zoning designation. So our concern is it can go anywhere. And we have no limitations on it. So it could be R1, it could be R2, it could be R3. If they find an area that meets all our rules, there is no zoning designation at the moment. So we're trying to fix that. We're trying to go back and actually put zoning designations on the mining activities and do a better definition of the mining activities that can go there.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mary. Next on our agenda is preliminary plat approval for a 6-lot subdivision on 5.36 acres by Lewis Cass Beasley III. That's on Highway 10 in the 3rd Civil District. Jim, you representing Cass? Okay. Do
They have small copies, but the big ones are nice.
Okay, we looked at this last month and discussed the common driveway aspect, and I have to apologize to the commission. I was not aware at the time, Mr. Beasley wasn't able to be here. I was not aware that TDOT had already approved all the driveway entrances for this project. And so, and all the culverts had been purchased, and I was unaware of that, and I'm sorry about that. But anyway, so we have brought the preliminary back in front of you for reconsideration on that aspect, and I will be glad to try to answer any other questions you might have.
Okay.
Just so y'all know, I do have in this folder, if y'all want to look at them, I do have all the TDOT approvals for the driveways.
Okay. So that was one of the main questions about this subdivision is apparently it was already taken care of. We just weren't aware of it, which is why it's good to put things off and make sure we are aware of everything that's going on. Any questions from the commission at this time?
Well, Mr. Chairman, with that being settled, I'd like to make a motion just to approve it. So that was the only issue we had last time.
Mary, do you have anything you want to say about this before we vote?
Sure, I can go over what comments I had in the packet and if they've been resolved or not, if that would be helpful. But I think there's a motion on the floor, so if you want to get a second before discussion, potentially.
Right. Do I have a second to that motion? We have a motion by Mr. Thomas and a second by Mr. Noller. Now the item is up for discussion. Mary?
I think all the items that we had talked about previously have been addressed. We had talked about the concern with lot 1 being slightly restricted by flood area A at the south corner. The municipal building setback line has been adjusted. You can see it's been labeled as the edge of that flood zone. So the building envelope will be out of flood zone A for that property. The only other item that I believe did not get addressed would be that the water line in this area is labeled as being a 6-inch water line, and the note's been added to the plat that it's 1.1 miles to the nearest fire hydrant. So per the subdivision regulations, fire hydrants are required in all subdivisions and should be located no more than 1,000 foot apart and be within 500 feet of any residential, commercial, or industrial lot. With this fire hydrant being over a mile away to serve these residential lots, the commission could consider requesting a fire hydrant for protection of these proposed lots with that 6-inch water line on Highway 10 in this area. And then the other remaining comment had been pertaining to the soils area, but the applicant noted in response to my comments that those soils areas would be shown on the final plat submittal.
Okay. Same? Do you have anything?
I have nothing to add.
Jim, have y'all discussed fire hydrants on that? Okay. Just thought I'd answer that before we moved on to,
Sorry. I mean, as far as I know, it didn't really come up last time too much, and no, we have not discussed anything right there concerning that.
I thought I'd go to you before a commissioner may ask if y'all have thought about it. Any questions from planning commission? Yes, sir.
So on the fire hydrant, if the property is served by a 6-inch, is it required or is it just suggested that they have a fire hydrant?
The language in the subdivision regulation is that fire hydrants shall be required in all subdivisions and shall be located no more than 1,000 feet apart and be within 500 feet of any residential, commercial, or industrial lot. So if the commission decides not to require a fire hydrant, that would be giving a variance from that requirement.
So it is required unless applicant were to ask for and receive a variance. We have not been asked for that.
And that's
So-
why my motion did not include the variance.
Okay.
Just one.
Any other questions? Any commission member?
Mr. Beasley would like to request that variance if possible.
It's possible.
We would like to make a request for that.
Okay. So we have a new item that's added to this. Applicant would like to request that a variance be granted not to require a fire hydrant, which is required in our subdivision regulations at this time. We do have a motion on the floor that does not contain a variance for the fire hydrant, and we have a second to that motion. So in order for that variance to be considered, we would have to dispose of the motion that's on the floor now, and then someone would have to make another motion with the variant.
Do we need to make a motion to add it to the agenda as a second item, or just add it into the motion for the approval of the site plan?
I don't think it's gonna matter anyway. Mr. Swaffer hadn't made any motion. Mr. Thomas, do you have any changes that you'd like to make to your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor at this time to approve preliminary plat approval for this six lot subdivision. It is seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It does pass without the variance. Next on our agenda is final plat approval for the Towns at Melrose. This is a townhome subdivision on 11.15 acres located in the 4th Civil District. This did come up last month, but was put off until this month. Is anyone here to speak for that? Jim, you're for that applicant too, aren't you? Okay, good.
Yes, sir. Does anyone need copies? We've looked over this for several months. Nothing has changed. Does anybody need copies to look at? Okay, that being said, like I said, we've looked over this several months. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to address them, but I think it's already been hashed through pretty well.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Jim?
Mary didn't have a chance to look at last month.
Right. Oh, well, I'll get to it. I'll start with y'all first, see if you have any right now. You may have some again after we get to Mary. Mary, would you like to address this?
Absolutely. For this project, the comments in your packet, I'm going to go through those, and I had received responses to those. So I'm going to let you know what those are. The final plat submittal for a condominium subdivision or a horizontal property regime includes submittal and approval of construction plans being reviewed and considered prior to the final plat. There's a note that for condominium subdivisions, these construction plans should contain as-built drawings of all underground utilities regardless of proposed ownership, and the construction and design of all public facilities which are proposed for dedication to the governing body. The response that I received is that those had been given to Sam. So I think we just need Sam to verify whether those are reviewed and set to go. Understanding that they are probably not as-built drawings, they're probably construction plans because they're not in the ground currently. So we just need to make sure that this body is comfortable with the final plat submittal based on the fact that these are construction plans under review, and as-built drawings will follow, I'm sure, once the facilities have actually been constructed. There is concern that's been voiced in the past about the added residential traffic on Melrose Drive from this project. I had asked in my comments if there was a possibility that that internal drive be extended to the property lines on the north side of the property in the event that a surrounding property redevelops or develops. There might be an opportunity to provide additional access that would give some release to Melrose Drive. The response from the applicant on that was that it would be unlikely, in their opinion, that the project owners or the adjoining property owners would be in favor of that as an option. So I did just want to note that you all, so you're aware of that conversation. I believe the articles of the HOA have been submitted for review to Sam as well. So that has been taken care of. And then I'm assuming any performance bonds that were needed for the public utilities have also been submitted to Sam. So that's the remaining comments that I had pertaining to this project.
Okay. Do we have a recommendation?
My recommendation would be based on all of the documents that are correct being submitted to Sam and him having reviewed it and being comfortable with the construction documents, approval based on consistency with what's in the subdivision regulations.
So our advisor has advised that that she would approve this based on all the documents being turned in to Sam and everything. Sam?
So the construction documents that has the sewer, the water, all the items that are going to be required to be in there have been thoroughly reviewed. They were reviewed by the water department and the engineer prior to the site plan approval. So I've had them for quite some time and they have been thoroughly looked at. So they have been submitted. I have them. I've reviewed them. Everything on there checks out. There's a thorough packet of an entire HOA policy that was given to me for the subdivision that covers everything. So, and as we mentioned at the last couple of meetings, the only question that was really brought up that was pushed towards myself is the opaque barrier with the vegetation. As we start doing the planning and the construction portion, I will work with them on trying to meet the criteria that we were looking for.
Okay. Before we go to commission questions or anything, is there any representative from the neighbors here tonight that would like to speak? Okay. Commission members, any questions? No questions? Okay, well, I guess we're ready to move on this thing. Does anybody have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve this final plat.
We have a motion by Rhonda to approve this. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mary Ann. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say no. Motion does pass with one dissenting vote. Mr. Harper. Okay. Next on our agenda is site plan approval for the Jesse Peters Front Street Apartments located in the 7th Civil District. Is anybody here to speak for this apartment complex?
I do have a question. Is this on the agenda? Did we defer from last month or was this included
know.
as an error?
I just turned the page and here it was. I thought we handled this last month.
Yeah, I included it in my comments, but I wasn't sure and didn't ask. Sam or Rosalie, do we know?
Did we take care of this last month, Sam? No, Mary Ann, do you have last month's minutes? Did you look right quick and make sure? Let's hold up just a minute while she checks and make sure.
I have that it was approved with a 6-2 vote last month. So if we can strike this from the agenda, it's already been acted on.
Mr. Nolan,
It come before us and we voted on approving the zoning our last meeting.
No,
Talking
sir.
about county
We voted on
county
approving the
court.
site plan.
and then it came back here after that for this is for a site plan approval.
We voted on a site plan.
And I know that it
last
went
month.
before the Board of Zoning Appeals also and is already been taken care of there and everything. So I just wanted to make sure our minutes reflected that and everything. It's already been taken care of. So let's move on. Next is new business. First item under new business is a request by Wayne Taylor for the rezoning on Highway 25 of 4.54 acres from A1 to R1. He would like to divide these into 2 lots, and this is located in the 7th Civil District. Is anyone here, Mr. Taylor here? Is anyone here representing him? You'd come to the podium there, please. Push the button so we can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Just tell us what you're wanting to do here, please.
Mr. Wayne Taylor has a 4.5 acre tract between 25 and old 25. Just want it, it's in agriculture now. Want to change it to R1 in the 2 separate tracts. We've got the soils done and just waiting on Jim to get started with the rest of it.
Okay, everybody's waiting on Jim. Does anybody have any questions for the gentleman here? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. Could you give us your name for our minutes?
Randy Chumley with Halo Realty.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Chumley? Okay. Mary?
So the applicant is requesting rezoning from A1 agriculture forestry to R1 residential for this unaddressed property on Highway 25, identified as tax map 18, parcel 34.07. The property consists of about 4.54 acres. It's on the south side of Highway 25, between Highway 25 and Old 25. The surrounding properties are zoned A1 agricultural forestry and residential along Baggett Lane to the south. Your packet, page 12, includes a copy of the zoning map in the area. The subject property is outlined in green, and you can see the A1 surrounding on most sides and the R1 to the south of the property in that area. These properties are in the Hartsville, this property is in the Hartsville Trousdale Water and Sewer Utility District, and it appears that there's a water line on Highway 25 in this area. Property is not in a special flood hazard area and does not have any significant steep slopes, which should be greater than 15 to 20%. The Trousdale County Growth Plan identifies this area as a rural area outside of the Urban Services District urban growth boundary. The plan states that rural areas are not prevented from being used as commercial, residential, or industrial development. However, any such use should be less dense and should retain the character of the area. Low to moderate density will be allowed in these areas. Highway 25 is identified as an arterial, and Old Highway 25 is identified as a collector in the major thoroughfare plan. I included in your packet the descriptions of the A1 Agriculture Forestry District, which is the current zoning of the property, and the R1 Residential, which is the requested zoning. R1 Residential District is intended to be utilized in areas where, due to remoteness, the absence of necessary urban services, or the continuation of farming or agricultural activities, development of a suburban density is undesirable or unfeasible. These districts are therefore designed to provide suitable areas for low density residential development characterized by an open appearance. The uses permitted by right in the R1 district, which is what the applicant is requesting, are single family and duplex dwellings, essential services, and accessory uses and structures. The required density in the R1 district is based on the availability of utilities. The subject property is around 4.54 acres and appears to be served by public water, but not wastewater. So the permitted density for the R1 zoning would be around 4 one dwelling lots, because 1 acre would be required without public wastewater available. In staff's rendering of this rezoning request, the property does not appear to be constrained by floodplain or steep slope. Staff has some concerns about potential development creating additional connections on an arterial collector, but that could be reviewed at the platting or development phase of the property. The property has access to water on Highway 25. There is adjacent property zoned R1. The R1 residential zoning district is noted as being suitable for areas where development at a suburban density is not appropriate, and development is intended to be low density in this area characterized by an open appearance, which is consistent with the growth plan designation of rural areas.
Sam, do you have any comments on this?
I have a question. How'd the soils turn out on that property?
Mr. Randy Dickerson has already been out there to locate sufficient soil areas to accommodate these two lots. I haven't finalized the map for him or anything yet to tell you exactly how they turned out, but he has found sufficient soil to accommodate two residential lots.
With how many bedrooms is my biggest question.
Well, I once again, that's not necessarily for me to say. I would say there would be at least 3 apiece would be my thoughts. We usually don't go less than that if at all possible. But that's not to say that once we get into all this with TDEC, that can change just depending on the any drainage issues or anything, depending on what kind of dirt it actually is.
Good. Okay. Any questions from any of the commission members?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am, Mary Ann?
How are they going to access the property off of Old Highway 25 or regular Highway 25? Looks like you can access.
It would be my guess they would use Old Highway 25.
I don't know if anybody's familiar with the property, but the slope on the Highway 25 side is pretty substantial. The old Highway 25 would be the best access for this one, especially for the traffic. And depending on how the lots get cut up is my biggest concern, and how many bedrooms it perked for. I'm assuming that, for what I've been informed, that two houses of a decent size is probably the maximum that it will be able to support.
Questions? Commissioners? Would anybody like to make a motion then?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Thomas to approve. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Swafford. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It does pass unanimously. Thanks, sir.
Thank y'all.
Next on our agenda is site plan approval for James Burns mini storage units on New Halltown Road. Is Mr. Burns, or this is a gym project? Okay.
Mr. Burns is here for any questions.
Okay.
Survey related questions.
All right, Jim.
Anyway, Mr. Burns is looking at putting 30 mini storage units out on New Halltown Road, just off of the 25 intersection right there. And I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you might have concerning the site plan right there.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Everybody aware of where this property is? Turn out New Halltown. It would be just up on the right there. While y'all are looking, Mr. Burns, wherever you might be, do you have any comments you'd like to make, sir? Okay. Wanted to let you have your opportunity if you do. Mr. Burns may need to buy him a chainsaw at some time. All right, y'all have had a chance to look at this. Any questions? No questions? Mary, do you have any comments upon this?
Yeah, so I am sorting through the items. So in your packet on page 13, you can see there was detail that needed to be added for this project. I think most of this detail has been added. I have a few questions for this project. I was curious on if there was any drainage retention or detention proposed for the project. The landscaping area, they've provided some buffer area detail that includes a 7-foot tall fence that'll be opaque. I would just be curious if we could add detail on what the vegetation would be in that buffer, the tree type or the shrub type that's included in that. Just check on a few other things that I had in here. The other item, the applicants noted that there's no parking proposed for the storage areas. The zoning code section 4.010 notes that other structures are customarily requiring automobile storage areas for buildings and uses not listed in that table. The off-street parking requirement should be determined by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I would recommend that the applicant apply to the Board of Zoning Appeals to have a determination made on the amount of parking that would be required for this use, as mini warehousing isn't listed in the parking requirements. I would say that as part of this approval, you could approve their site plan contingent on adding whatever parking the Board of Zoning Appeals asks for. I would just note that, understanding that I got comments to the applicant relatively late in the process on this one. I think besides that, all the other comments that I have been added to the site plan for review. Oh, one other question that I have is I'm assuming there's no signage proposed on the site at this time. And if there is signage proposed, that would need to be
No, not
reviewed.
at, not at this time. There's not any signage proposed.
Okay. So I think my main questions remaining are just detail on what's included in the buffer area. And then just making sure that whatever parking is required is worked out with the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Go ahead, sir.
So with what was submitted at this time and speaking with the applicant, there is no parking that's being requested here at this time. It's going to be a drive-through self-service storage units. There's no office spacing. There's no parking. There's going to be no allowed area for campers or anything like that at this time. So if I informed him if he is wanting to do that in the future, if he plans on expanding, then that is something that he'll have to come in and have looked at it for the parking areas that will be required. But at the moment, what we've got is the drive-through self-service storage. We've already got 2 of those.
He's not gonna have an office or anything there?
Jim, do your
Yes,
employers there behind you have any?
Yes,
questions
this
for
is Mr. Burns and his real estate agent, Mr. Walker. Concerning the vegetation, I'm not exactly sure what your codes require, but we will do whatever Sam tells us to do, basically, and we'll just leave it at that.
Preferably evergreens, but
Yes, we will do whatever Sam instructs us to do and abide by that.
What we may want to do, if commission decides to approve this plan, is as we did with the last plat that we just looked at, we empowered Sam to work with the developer and stuff, that they would bring the fence and vegetation to his approval. And so that could be included in any motion or anything like we did that last one, should the commission decide to. Applicant, I think I see a head shaking, would be okay with that.
I think we need to bring it to code, to our regs.
I'm sorry, Ms. Carper, I didn't
I
understand.
think we should hold it to our regs on that border.
We're talking about on the vegetation. Oh, I agree. I agree. I don't think we're suggesting that they don't comply with our regulations. It just, I think what they were talking about was the particular type of plants and that type of thing.
so
Am I right?
yes, the proposal submitted on the site plan here is what we requested. It just doesn't have a designation on the type of tree that they're planning on using. I prefer the evergreen, so it's a constant buffer. And I will look at some of our other options. There's larger evergreens that will grow and they grow out at the base. So it's a wider base and prevents less visibility.
I'm like him. I prefer the evergreens because they don't lose their leaves during the year. And as he said, they're a more permanent buffer. Any other?
Is this preliminary? It's a preliminary plan, right?
It says site plan approval. Is this final?
It's a site
This is
plan.
final?
Yeah, so for a site plan, you only review it once. There's no preliminary and final.
Okay. So if you have concerns or questions about some of the issues that Mary brought up, that could easily be taken care of by including those in any motion, should any commissioner decide to want to do that. Questions from any other commissioners for Jim, the applicant, Sam, or Mary? Okay. Do I have a motion? Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this with them getting their approval for the parking issue through the zoning appeals board, and that Sam oversee the type of vegetation that's used for the buffer strip.
So your motion is that they meet the parking regulations from the beginning? Okay. Does everybody understand the motion? We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Thomas to approve this project with the applicant meeting our parking regulations, which are already in our rules.
Sorry. To resolve the parking question, there is not a parking requirement for mini warehousing or warehousing that would be applicable to this development. And the zoning code requires that any use that's not specifically mentioned in parking requirements, that should be determined by the BZA what parking would be required.
Oh,
So the
okay.
BZA does not have anything to go on. They would be determining what would be required based on the number of staff, the need for parking, that kind of thing. I think your motion makes sense. I just wanted to clarify for,
They would have to give any variance on that. We don't have the authority to do that, correct?
they would set that required number.
Yeah, so that's what, in my motion, that's what I was referring to, that they go before BZA and get that approval.
Get that variance
Yes.
approved. Okay. Does everybody understand the motion? Motion is that we approve this site plan.
And may I interrupt momentarily?
Sure.
What is the purpose of the variance if it's not required for mini storage, if parking is not required for mini storage?
Sorry, there's no detail in the code and that for any use that's not detailed with the parking requirement in the code, the Board of Zoning Appeals is determining the required amount of parking. You're not getting a variance for that. The condition is that you go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and they review the number of parking spaces needed on the site plan. And
Okay.
if their review turns up no parking is required, then you'd be set to proceed.
Okay, is that what you understood today? Or did we address that with the people that we talked to?
Did you go in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals already?
No, because there was some question about whether there was anything for them to review. And I thought it had got determined that there was not anything for them to review, but I may have misunderstood what I was told.
Commissioners, y'all be thinking of any questions, comments you'd like to make while Sam looks back in his notes and things?
And Mr. Chairman, let me be clear that I'm not meaning to add that warning, the Board of Zoning section of my motion to delay or slow this up. It's merely just to get everything.
You were of the understanding that that was in our current
And that it was
zoning
required.
and that you're not willing to forego that,
Exactly.
that they go through the proper process and go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
If it is found that it is not required, then
You're good with it.
I'm good with.
Sam?
Before I answer his question on that, I want, since Mary's got her computer, is the Board of Zoning Appeals to determine that based on the personnel that's working at the,
I would assume that that would be the primary way that they would be determining it. The uses that are listed in the off-street parking requirements are single detached dwelling, apartment, townhouse, or condominium, boarding houses and rooming houses, other dwelling units, hotel, motels, and other tourist accommodations, church, auditorium, manufacturing, industrial, or wholesaling, office and professional, retail sales and service establishments, medical or dental clinics, service stations, restaurants, shopping centers, and then N lists other structures or uses that would require automobile areas. For building and uses not listed, the off-street parking requirement shall be determined by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So reviewing that, in my understanding, there's no criteria for this committee for this commission to look at and decide if they're compliant with the parking requirements, which is why I would recommend letting the Board of Zoning Appeals make a determination on that. If you have a different understanding of that section.
so my understanding of the off-street parking is it gives these criteria down here for things that qualify for them to determine this. The request in front of us is not requesting automobile storage or any area for that. They're just requesting the self-storage storage buildings themselves, and there are 0 employees that work there. So it's a self-service storage. So that answer, that's my opinion on the off-street parking requirement, is that this is a non-manned building that's not going to have storage of vehicles and campers and stuff like that at this facility. So I informed them that at the point that if they do decide to expand into adding another addition, or they decide to add parking areas for those type of vehicles, then they will need to get permission from the Board of Zoning Appeals and set requirements for those type of areas.
Well,
Is
my
that your
understanding-
understanding, Jim?
That's generally what I understood today, but I mean, if it's not the way it is, it's not the way it is, but that's what I understood before we came to the meeting, yes.
Okay. Applicant understands that if anything changes, any additions and stuff being made.
Oh, yes. I mean, if anything changes outside of this site plan, if they go to expand past the units that we've shown and the design that we've shown and everything, it's my understanding that they'll have to come back in here with a revised or an additional site plan at that point.
Start all over.
And basically, update and show as built and everything at that point.
Okay. Mr. Thomas actually had the floor first, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Nolan. Yes, sir.
So really, I guess my question is, do we have the authority to make the decision whether it needs parking or not? Or because the way Mary read that, it seems like we don't, only the Board of Zoning has that.
I don't think we do. I think that's
And that's the reason I
a
was
decision
wanting
by
to say-
the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yeah.
I think based on the conversation that it sounds like Sam had today, that I was not privy to, I believe he's interpreting that as relating only to automobile storage needing review. And that there is no parking requirement for this use because there is no staff and no needed parking. So I wouldn't say that that is something the Board of Zoning Appeals would need to make a determination on. And I did not participate in that conversation. But if that's what's expressed to the applicant, and you want to go ahead and understand that there's no staff, no parking requirement, I think that's fine for this board to be making the determination on whether the site plan is set to go. Does that make sense?
Especially since we're of the understanding that should changes be made, that they would have to come back and start the process over, especially with the Board of Zoning Appeals.
So I guess my last question would be, Sam, who did you speak with to come to the decision that it didn't have to go to Board of Zoning Appeals?
I printed off every single thing in our ordinance and read it thoroughly. And my interpretation of it is that it doesn't meet what it's asking for. And I read the same sections that Mary read on the off-street parking requirements. And the only thing that even remotely gets close in one of those criteria is other structures or uses customarily requiring automobile storage areas for buildings and uses not listed. The off-street parking requirements shall be determined by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So this is requiring automobile storage areas.
So then this body has the authority to decide whether it needs parking or not. I get that. That's really what it comes down to, whether this goes to BZA or not. The regs that Mary read off said we don't have that authority. Board of Zoning Appeals does. I'm just trying to cover us and not overstep. That's all.
Mayor, do you have an opinion on this?
Well, the question I have, would this be more applicable to off-street loading and unloading requirements that says every building or structure hereafter constructed and used for industry, business, or trade involving the receiving or distribution of vehicles, materials, and merchandise shall provide suitable paved space for the loading and unloading of vehicles off the street or public alley And it does go on and has some dimensions listed on there. Since this is, to me, it's more of a storage. You're pulling up, you're unloading, and then you're packing up and leaving again. It's not, you're not sitting there going in shopping or anything like this. To me, that seems to be more applicable than the other parking, but my question becomes, when we approved Dustin Dillahay's request down here off Planter Street in White Oak, I don't remember there being a lot of discussion about off-street parking or anything like that at that time. And if we didn't do it on that development, which was just a few years ago, I don't see how we can now require it from them when we didn't do it to similarly situated business inside the urban services district.
It's a very good
Now, I
point.
could be wrong, but I don't remember that discussion taking place at the time. I could be wrong, but I don't remember that being said. If any of the planning commission remembers, if that came up at the time, you can please correct me, but I don't remember it.
I don't recall it either. Do you, David?
We didn't, and like I said, I'm not trying to make a big deal whether they need it or don't need it. My point is, after hearing Mary read that, because I haven't seen that, do we have the authority, or does it automatically have to go, because it's a parking issue, go to the Board of Zoning Appeals?
Sam, do you have something else?
If you want my personal opinion on it, and my interpretation is there is no parking required for this structure. That's my personal opinion. Now, if they change their plans and they come back forward with an office, or they come back forward with requesting parking areas, then dimensions need to be looked at, and we need to reconsider it anyways. Okay, we can address it then.
I actually agree with that. And I'm 100% in agree with the mayor that we should treat all applicants exactly the same, which I know everybody wants to also.
So, Mr. Chairman, with that clarification, I'd like to amend my motion
Okay,
to approve with the way it is, without the Board of Zoning approval, and giving Sam the authority to make the decision on the vegetation.
okay. Do I have a second?
A second.
I'm sorry. Mr. Nolan, you had a question a minute ago. Now's the discussion time for that.
I was wanting to know if they was gonna have an office. I assume, but what everybody's saying, they're not gonna have an office.
I believe we pretty much covered that.
That's what I was wanting to know. I caught that we wasn't gonna have one, so.
Yeah,
But
I think
if they
that's been
were, they
thoroughly
wouldn't.
covered.
If they were gonna have an office, they wouldn't need a parking spot.
Right. I think that is common sense.
I do have in my possession the drawn out drawings of what each of the spaces and sizes are going to be, and there is no office space.
And once again, my question was, did we have the authority to even make the decision? Not whether a decision should be made. I just want to be clear, because I'd never read that part of the ordinance that said that they had the sole authority on that.
Well, it's better to be sure on the front end and take the time necessary to discuss it and come to the right answer. I don't have a problem with that. That's why we're here. All right. Is everybody aware? We have a motion to approve this site plan approval. We have a second. Any other discussion or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It does pass. Mr. Burns, welcome to Trousdale County. All right.
I'm sorry, I missed you at the second.
I'm sorry.
I missed you at the second.
Mr. Swaffer, seconded. Okay. Next on our agenda is site plan approval for Turner and Associates Dollar General Store on Highway 231 South, 1.42 acres and located in the 6th Civil District. Do we have someone here to speak for Turner and Associates? Please push the button, state your name so our secretary can get your minutes, please.
Hi, Allison Turner with Greenwood Design, representing this project as the engineer. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, why don't you tell us what you want to do, then we might have some questions.
We are presenting a typical Dollar General store. parking, building, all the usual accompaniments. This one would be in the Castellan Springs area. I'm trying to figure out which one I'm doing first. Castellan Springs one
Yes, ma'am.
is first. We received comments over the weekend and addressed those today. Sent those to Ms. Turner and to Sam. We're in agreement with the comments with one caveat. We don't have a relationship with the neighboring property. So where the drive has been requested to extend all the way to the property, we've got a retaining wall in that location. So that adds a bit of a challenge as far as grade. To extend all the way to the property would require us to grade onto the neighbor's property, which obviously we can't do. And the other concern is just a cross-access agreement, not knowing that property right now is currently zoned, I'm guessing agricultural or something along those lines. It looks like a farm. So not knowing what type of vehicles would be going on there, there's some concern by Dollar General representative whether what vehicles would be accessing. Don't need construction things going across in front of the Dollar General entrance and things like that of that nature. So there's a concern about that blanket access.
So I'm just gonna note, page 16 in your packet includes the zoning map. The surrounding parcels are zoned C1, general commercial, the same as your property currently,
Okay, I'm good.
same as this property.
So that's the one.
I do have one quick
that we have a
question.
concern about.
You said this will be a typical Dollar General?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that the same as is that a Dollar General market or
Just a-
Dollar General, or are they one and the same? I don't have a clue.
It's not a marketplace, correct? It's just the more typical
Okay.
Dollar General
Okay,
convenience store type of access.
yes. This is the one located at 231.
This is located on the property that the ATM is currently sitting on. It's that property.
And the ATM is to remain with some modification to the pavement around it.
Okay. All right. Mary?
So as we've discussed, the applicant's proposing a site plan to request approval for a Dollar General store. The store is about 10,640 square foot. It's on about 1.44 acres. It's on tax map 29, parcel 26.12. It's an unaddressed property on Highway 231 South. Property is zoned C1, general commercial. General merchandise is permitted by right in the C1 zoning district. Where only public water is available, the minimum lot size is 30,000 square foot. So the site's around 1.4 acres and well past that requirement. There were a few comments in your staff report that I've received responses on, and I'm assuming we'll get an updated site plan on them shortly if I have not already received it. The maximum width of the driveway openings per code should be 35 foot. The proposed driveway is 36 foot wide. I believe the applicant has responded that that will be reduced to the 35 to meet that. 5.044F, which are standards for the commercial general zoning district, require that 10% of the parking area should be devoted to landscaping as required by the Planning Commission. The applicant has noted that they will provide a landscaping plan for this site that meets all requirements. The submittal does not currently include a landscaping plan, so that the 10% of the parking area is not shown as landscaped. Again, I had the comment that it would be beneficial to continue the drive to the property line in case of opportunity for cross access in the future. The applicant has noted that there's a retaining wall, so they would prefer not to do that. I did just want to let you all know that I had asked if that could be considered as a possibility to be able to limit the number of accesses to an arterial in a short amount of spaces. If the property to the south does develop, it's nice to be able to have cross access so a driveway can be shared. Understanding that site constraints might stop that from being a possibility. I had asked if there was going to be any drainage features proposed. I believe a retention area has been added, or a detention feature to the site has been added. I have not looked yet at the detail on that, but I believe it probably is going to be an updated plans that Sam will review. The building coverage of the site meets the code, so that's all set. The other thing that I did want to note for this is that the Board of Zoning Appeals did just review a variance for the sign package as well as the number of parking spaces. Per code, this site would be required to have about 53 parking spaces. It has 36 shown, and that was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. They've also been approved for 205-ish square foot of signage, one of those being a building sign and the other being the pole sign you can see indicated in position on the site plan. So those variances have been approved by the board. Based on that, staff would recommend approval of this site plan with the conditions that the driveway width be adjusted to meet code. The parking area is landscaped to meet code and satisfy the planning commission. Sufficient loading space is provided and any drainage areas are detailed. And then the signage and parking already received a variance, so that's been handled for this project.
Anybody have any questions for Mary?
I did just want to note, sorry, realizing one more thing. Pertaining to the loading space, the code requires 10 by 40 space for loading. The applicant responded that Dollar General provides wider than typical drive aisles that allow for the turning radius for large trucks, preventing them from entering the public streets. So staff is not concerned about there being sufficient space for loading for the vehicles in this property.
Okay. Again, any questions for Mary before we move on to Sam? Sam?
So the changes were submitted, like Mary said, she's covered everything in her review. I've been reviewing the drainage issues and I'll continue reviewing it. That's something that will or could change during site prep. We never know what we're going to hit when you start clearing off property. So that will be addressed continually as we go along, and any issues will be addressed as they come up. And I'll tell you the same thing I told the Board of Zoning Appeals. The fact that they found enough soils area in that area is excellent, that they could get the store in there. The soils area near the four-way is terrible. So we're very lucky they could fit in there. Like Mary said, everything has either been addressed or is being addressed. So.
Okay. Any questions for Sam? Is there anyone here from the 231 area that would like to comment on this project? Okay. Commissioners, questions? Okay. Do I hear a motion? Have a motion by Ms. Baker to approve this project. Do I have a second? Have a second by Mr. Swaffer. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It does pass. Next, might as well stay there, is site plan approval for Turner and Associates, Dollar General Market, Hickory Ridge Lane, 1.56 acres in the 9th Civil District. Ma'am, you'd like to address this one?
Yes, again, Allison Turner with Greenwood Design, the engineer representing this project. We had met with Sam regarding this project and some concerns regarding entrance and things of that nature. And we have provided a widening of the road to kind of allow some turn stacking for turn lane into the property so it doesn't impede Hickory Ridge Drive. there's limited truck access that comes to Dollar General. I think it's 1 to 2 times a week. Possibly they have their large Dollar General truck come, and then, 1 or 2 trucks a day for Coke delivery or chips or things of that nature. So it's not as intense of a retail operation as some places are. They're pretty efficient with their loading and unloading. They have very strict rules about how they lay out their sites so that there are no trucks backing onto the roads. They want all their traffic to be internal. So there is, I think I did not address the comments individually back to Ms. Turner, but we're in agreement with those as well. There is a bit of concern again about that drive access going all the way through the property. But in this particular case, the adjacent property is the same owner as the current property, the property that we're working on. So there's some room there to try and negotiate for our property to go, our road to extend, or at least provide an easement to extend to that property. We do have about a 6-foot grade difference again in that location. We're grading it out as opposed to putting a retaining wall in that location, but so we can provide an easement for that, potentially working with the neighbor on what type of activity would be able to pass through there, if that's what the city determines that they would prefer. We've added a fence along the back row. We'll modify the landscape to meet Sam's requirements, the landscape ordinance requirements, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Market or regular Dollar General?
This is a market. This is a market. Part of that, and you can see the parking is a little more intense. We've got more parking on this one, about 50 parking spaces, I believe, versus the other one, which is a little lower intensity parking.
Okay.
So we meet the ordinance for parking on this one and did not ask for variance.
Okay. Anybody have questions for this lady? Yes, sir.
So on all the drawings that I've seen for this project, all of them connected to Hickory Ridge instead of the main road there. Was there ever any consideration of connecting it to 25, just like the one in Castellan is?
Well, in Castellan Springs, we're not on a corner, so we don't have an option. In this particular one, normally we would be requested to not come off of the highway road. We're always requested to come off the side streets. That's pretty standard. In this particular case, there's a very large drainage ditch there. And the site has quite a bit of elevation going from the road, from Highway 25 to the rear of the property. And it would be very challenging to make an entrance on this corner property because we sit, I forget what the elevation is, but it's 15 or more feet from the roadway up to the building elevation. It may be more like, it's probably more like 20 feet.
I know some of y'all had requested that Mr. Scruggs be here, and Bill is here. Bill, we appreciate you coming. So if you have questions for Bill.
Yeah, I think I was one of the ones that requested Bill because at some point, I mean, it took the county forever to take over this road. I wanted to confirm, is this a county road now or is it private? Because there's still construction going on in this.
It's county now.
Okay.
Yeah. It took them several years to get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's done. It takes about 5 years to turn one over to the county. We're done the final pavement, and in 2 years, you do your final pavement, and it's gotta not have any problem for 2 years, and then don't have any problem come over to the county.
Bill, do you have any issues with what you've heard tonight from the project? Sir?
Well, the only thing I was worried about was what she addressed on the corner about widening the corner there, because if you come in west on 25, somebody had to go all the way over on the other side of 25 to get in there. And the only other thing is all the water from Acorn Trail comes down the curve and goes in the storm drain there at 25. So if they cut a driveway in, they'll have to rework all the drainage there. They'll have to put in new drains there to catch the water, so. But that's mainly what I was worried about, is either going either way, it's gonna be kind of hard to get in there with a semi. So if they gonna widen it out, that's the main thing I was worried about, because the road itself's built to subdivision guidelines, and, you know, I had my own inspectors inspect it while they build it, so. It's got 10 inches of gravel and then 3 inches of asphalt on it.
Okay. So you're good with what this lady has proposed?
Yeah, as long as they swing that corner, as long as they widen that corner out and repair the drainage, catch the water up there where it goes, because the only gonna turn and go right into their parking lot, so. There's quite a bit of water comes down through there on a big rain, so. But right now it comes all the way out to 25 and they're gonna cut it off. They'll have it cut off, so they'll have to rework the drainage and catch the water back to the north side of the driveway or somewhere right in that area. They'll have to rework the drain and then.
And you're good with all that? And
Yes, sir, we're well
everything's-
aware,
yeah.
a significant amount of water's coming from
Yep.
the north side towards us.
Okay.
I've had discussions with them about the water, and we've been talking about ways to redirect it to handle the water flow coming off the hill.
Well, my main concern with asking the questions was we have quite a few people here tonight, which I'm sure is mainly for this project. And we're very lucky to have Mr. Scruggs with us. And if I lived out there, I would want to hear it from my building commissioner, probably before I would anyone else. So I wanted to take advantage of Bill being here so the neighbors or anyone here interested in this project could hear it from him. And if you're like me, Bill says it's all right, I think it's all right.
Yeah, that's the only thing I was worried about. Just
Okay.
Need a little more room to get trucks in and out of there, so. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Bill before Mr. Thomas? I'll give you next. Mr. Thomas.
So Bill, as I'm looking at the drawing here, where they start their turning lane isn't actually at the corner. It's actually north of the corner.
Yes,
And where the corner is
Yeah.
the highest point of that drop off. They're not going to be able to widen that unless you can extend the culvert out.
yeah, yes.
So is that what they're doing? Because that's not what's shown here.
They'll have to get a wider turning radius in there, yeah. Yeah. Because 53 footer will be if you can get in there with a 53 footer without getting on the curve, you'll be lucky, so.
So you're saying that corner will have to be
Yeah,
reworked
it'd
and
have to be
everything?
reworked a little bit, yeah. Make sure to get trucks. You know, she said they'd be coming more from the west, going in, turning in that way, so.
Well, you never know which way a truck's gonna come.
Yeah,
I catch them
get
coming
lost.
around my neighborhood and there ought not ever be
GPS,
one on mine as narrow as it is.
GPS, send them anywhere, so, yeah.
I'd rather it be done right the first time and then they come
Oh, yeah.
whichever direction
Yeah.
they want.
A whole lot better to do it right and
Yes, sir.
end any conflicts right off the bat. Get it done right and they won't have to worry about it
Right.
giving any problems, so.
Right. Mr. Nolan, you have a question for Bill?
Yeah, neighbor across there, Mr. Earps at one time was concerned about the water coming across. He's never had no water run into any of those storage buildings. And he won't none now, so I'm glad that they're gonna address that. with
Yeah,
a
it's
bigger-
addressed and it's in the plans. You've already heard that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Scruggs? Okay, Bill, we appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
The other question I had, Johnny, for the lady is, my concern is around for, we have residents in this immediate area is the lighting. I mean, it refers to a lighting schedule, but I still haven't seen that. What does that mean? Is that lights stay on 24 hours a day or they?
That's this one right here. You should have it on your desk.
Very back?
That shows where the lighting will hit the ground.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the one that's got spots all over it.
Okay, I'm getting to it.
While they're looking at stuff, if there's anyone from the neighborhood that would like to speak, you'll get that opportunity in just a moment.
And this building will sit below grade. There's a retaining wall at the back wall. It may just be a split face wall, but there'll be the hill will come down to where the neighbors are on the building and sit, they don't significantly below that. So that will help shield some of that as well. Color different lights, typically those flat iron, just down. Lights on the wall, facing towards the parking and down past line. So we only have one on that neighborhood side and then one in front of the building.
You just have two exterior lights.
No, just pole lights in the
Pole
parking
lights.
lot.
It didn't seem quite adequate to me, but
Well,
I think that's great for the neighborhood.
Well, obviously, we were trying to be sensitive to the fact that we are adjacent to a neighborhood. So, and there's also landscaping, and we'll have a 7-foot fence back there as well, which is not taken into account on our lighting numbers. The retaining wall does kind of take into account, but we don't have that opaque fence is not taken
And
into account.
The
that extra little bit.
landscaping and as it grows and the fence itself
Right.
will block some of that, right? Mr. Swaffer, do you have any follow-up questions there? Or was your question answered?
Yeah, I think it was answered.
Okay. David?
So I know at the BZA meeting last month, they've got the variance for the sign out front plus the variance for the one on the building. I haven't seen anything in the drawings as far as how tall that sign will be.
It's a 15-foot pole, and then the sign is on top of the 15-foot.
So on the drawings for this, where that sign's going to be located, is there enough fall radius around it to keep the sign on your property?
It's not in the right of way. It's outside of the right of way on our property. As far as fall radius, I'm not sure.
I know we do that with all the towers that get approved. I just was under the understanding that we did that with the signs also, so it didn't fall on someone else's property if a storm were to knock it down or
Is it
fall
going to be
into
in
the road.
front?
If it were to fall off of our property, it would just fall onto a road. I mean, it couldn't, it's not big enough to fall across the road or onto another property in the front. In the front corner, I think.
If we're going to start addressing that, we got a whole lot of them up here on 25 we need to go talk to too.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically I do hear that for towers particularly, because they're usually in more close proximity to neighborhoods. This being, adjacent to roadway, it's not typically talked about, but we can do is whatever the ordinance requires.
Any more questions, Dave? Does any other commissioner have a question for this lady before we move on to our advisors? Okay, sir, since you're standing, why don't you come ahead? That way, I don't want you to stand up the rest of the night.
Ed Royals is my name. I'm a resident of the Hickory Ridge neighborhood, and we do have a representation of folks here. Could I get y'all to stand up? And this is just a few folks. Some of our residents were providentially hindered, but there is quite a bit of concern about this project coming in at the end of our street. So that's why we wanted to be here for this. I know you all consider different criteria about making your decisions, and I am hopeful that one of that criteria includes how it impacts that neighborhood and the people that live there, that make their homes there. That's why we moved there, because it was a nice, quiet street. So we would ask you to consider the desire of the residents in this decision. Mainly our concern is the entrance off of our street. there, and I understand that some of them have been addressed, and I appreciate that. Regardless if the opening is widened, we still have a safety issue with children. There are a lot of children in our neighborhood, kids riding scooters down the street and bicycles down the street, skateboards in the street. We've been able to do that without a worry for quite a while. And if we have 18-wheelers pulling into our neighborhood, even at the entrance, that could impact that. There's already a problem exiting and entering our neighborhood depending on times of day. And that will seriously impact emergency vehicles being able to come in and out of the neighborhood, traffic on Highway 25 getting backed up in both directions if a truck is trying to wait to turn or that sort of thing. School traffic, increased traffic due to all the new developments that are coming in. What is it, down Hall? Is it Halltown where the
Melrose.
Melrose?
You're talking about the townhome subdivision?
The townhome.
Melrose.
123, I think.
113.
113 residents will be coming in there. That's going to add a lot of additional traffic. I don't imagine, I certainly don't know for sure, but I know when 18-wheelers pull in over highways need to be built with that understanding of they're going to have an extra heavy vehicle coming over, and pretty soon our road will be torn up at the entrance with 18-wheelers coming in there. Initial note here I've made myself here is David Thomas, who's my neighbor, has a video recording of Jason Ford where he told this meeting in a promise that no entrance would ever come off of Hickory Ridge Lane into any of that commercial property. I know you're not responsible for what he said, but he convinced you to vote in his favor by making that statement. I'll say it that way. Also, it's our Dollar General representative said that it's a typical Dollar General. I've gone around and looked at all the Dollar Generals in our area, and I don't know of one where the entrance is off of a neighborhood street. They're all off, the entrance is always off the highway. So I don't think this is typical in what they're wanting to do there. And thank you for your consideration. The future of our neighborhood is in your hands. And our only option is to trust you to represent us. Thank you very much.
I got one question before you sit down. You ended right there good, but I hadn't heard you say what you want us to do.
We don't want the entrance off of our street.
Okay. Just wanted to make that.
I understand.
I didn't understand that, so I just
Okay,
want to
I'm
make sure.
sorry I didn't make that clear.
Okay.
I understand TDOT is the one that would have to address that, but that's what they do. I just heard you say that TDOT approved 6 entrances off the highway for houses. So I know TDOT can do it, and those entrances are pretty close together. So all it will take, and TDOT, I'm assuming, has gotten this other Dollar General on 231. They've already approved an entrance there, I'm sure. It might cost more money. I don't know, but please respect our neighborhood and our children. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And I'd like to thank all the neighbors in that area for coming, taking your time to come. It's good to see people come out and represent their neighborhoods.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
The video that he's referring to that I have is just the planning commission meeting where that land was rezoned the second time they brought it forward. where Jason Ford made the statement that when I asked directly, he said, no, there's no way that they would be able to have an entrance coming off of Hickory Ridge.
Okay. Okay. And of course, I know we all know that it's on the committee, but just so that everyone here knows, we are just a recommending body. As people heard in the beginning with the mining resolution and that type of thing, we are required to follow the rules set forth by the Trousdale County Commission. We don't have a prerogative not to. And again, this is not for y'all. This is for the neighbors as we spoke. I think the gentleman that spoke for them said it great last month. It was about 6 months too late, because the time to really have addressed this issue to begin with would have been during the rezoning process, which is a function of the county commission, not this body. Only the county commission can rezone property. Okay. Before we move on to Mary and Sam, does anybody have a question or statement they'd like to make at this time on the commission? Mary?
So for this project, there was a couple items left to be addressed for consideration. The ordinance requires that 10% of the site area be landscaped. So I asked for a table to indicate that requirement is met based on what's proposed in the landscaping. Additionally, the buffer strip calls for a solid fence at least 7 foot high. I think the applicant verbally addressed this, but just indicating fence detailing to indicate that will be an opaque solid fence that meets that buffer requirement. Again, I had questions about the loading space, and the response on that is that the drive aisles are wide enough to provide for loading on site and no backing into the public street. I would note that this property did receive an approved sign variance in March 2022 from the Board of Zoning Appeals for their proposed wall sign and their pylon sign at the front of the site, their pole sign. If they just want to note that on the site plan. The building calculation, the building coverage as a % of the site should be noted on the plan as well. And then again, I had asked that internal driveway be considered as getting to the edge of the site to facilitate cross access and potentially negotiate an easement. So as the rest of the site does develop, those commercial properties could share this drive. I do think that would be a good consideration based on the concerns about, this property accessing Hickory Ridge. If that next property does develop as a commercial property and they do have cross access between these two sites, that property could be looked at as having an access onto the highway that would essentially service both commercial sites if cross access is negotiated. So I would recommend that this commission ask them to continue that drive to the property line and negotiate a cross access easement for the next property over. I know that it was addressed during the meeting, but my comment had been if the widening of Hickory Ridge in that turn lane that was going to be added is shown, they've discussed that and addressed that. And then my last question was regarding the detention pond, if any landscaping or fencing was proposed around that at the front of the site as well.
Have you received answers to any of those questions?
I don't believe I have, so this could be nice verbal response now.
I see you had one on there, the landscaping on the east side of the site. Is the land to the east side of the site, is it commercial or residential? So, okay.
It's commercial.
Okay.
I was more curious.
If it was residential, they wouldn't have a choice.
Sure. I had asked in regards to trying to see where they would add that additional landscaping to meet that 10% requirement on the site. So I wasn't sure if there was any proposed there.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mary? Okay. Sam? Oh, okay.
I can address one of those issues was there will be some landscape probably around the whatever water detention issues that as we address that. So that will add to it. We've had to
Has it
reroute.
changed from this?
It has, yes. I'd sent a more recent one today, trying to address some of those comments. We now have, picking up that water from the north side and taking it around the building and the parking and the retaining wall. We'll do some screening along that as well, so.
Did you get that?
So there's fencing and landscape along the back property line, and then there'll be something along either the detention or the ditching.
See this. Okay.
Actually living on the top side of that subdivision, I don't think they quite understand how much water is going to be coming down on that property, both down the road and directly above them, coming off down from Acorn and coming right onto the building that they're proposing.
Well, the slope of that property this lady's an engineer, right? This is surely not your first go round with.
No, it's concerning. Certainly, I drove up into the subdivision to see what was coming from that direction, and it's significant. And so it is a concern how we'll maneuver that water around. But obviously we have to, because we don't want it running off the top of the retaining wall right into the building. So it'll be picked up. There's a concrete ditch along one of the property lines that shoots right at us at a very high velocity. So we'll have to pick that up and route it towards Hickory Ridge and down Hickory Ridge with a ditch.
For your knowledge, moving forward with this project, this neighborhood has had to deal with this issue ever since it's been in existence.
Right.
And
we're
so
just going to be the
it is-
receiving end of that. So.
Other than that driveway, which I'm like Bill, I think it's been addressed. To me, this is the most pertinent issue, is that water runoff and the containment of that.
Yes.
So-
Did you have other questions?
I did, because we noticed as the subdivision grew, the more rooftops you had,
Certainly.
the more water that was getting dumped and the more problems as people down the hill were having.
It moves faster.
Acorn, as they've built it, and I understand you're an engineer, but the developer had engineers too, and we've all suffered.
I wasn't
from-
that engineer.
No, you
so-
weren't. I'm just saying that we're dealing with engineers
Yes.
all the time who tell us all kinds of stuff, but when it's actually built, we have to live with it. The way Acorn is designed, all the water is going to come down the property line, the middle of the subdivision, right on your building.
Yes,
So.
I'm well aware.
Okay.
So we've been discussing the water issue. There is ways to, there's culverts that have built-in stop blockers that it'll hit in stages and it will slow it down as it comes through, and then they divert from there. They have those all over the place, but it's like a cast concrete block. So the whole thing's cast in one piece, and it's got 3 stages of blocks that it has to funnel around, and then they divert. There is ways to slow the water down and get it to go in the direction they want. And that's something that we're going to have to, as the site prep gets, I've said this on many of them, as the site prep gets done, we have to look at what we're working with at that point. We've got a general plan of how to get the water moving. But until we get out there and do the site prep for the building, we can run into anything. So, but I think, you know me with your subdivision, I've been paying a lot of attention to trying to fix the water. So I will do everything I can. I know y'all's issues up there.
Well, and that being said, Jason actually pulled the original site plan for the Acorn stage and brought it back after they did their engineering study of the water. As you drive up the road, there's less actual places for the water to go. There's only one culvert that runs under the road. So it actually diverts all the water that's on the east side at the top of the hill across to the west side, which then runs straight down and then will affect this project. So I would like to see, you know, they did the engineering study of the water and we got the site plan approved, and okay, now I want to see what they're actually doing to do something about this water, because I don't think the new property owners down the road should have to deal with the same problems the old ones on Hickory Ridge have had to deal with.
Is Acorn the new road?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And is much steeper a road than Hickory Ridge is. And I understand why. Watching them build that road, I'm sure Beasley has got some loose teeth from all the rock he had to bust up just to get it to that grade. It was really bad through there.
Okay. Other questions? And we'll go to Sam. Okay, Sam?
So hearing the concerns, I've done everything possible to try to meet those concerns. There is topography issues and financial issues into meeting some of those concerns. But they have been more than willing to go out of their way to minimize what they can. Everybody needs to understand this is a public road. It's approved public road. What somebody's promised verbally, sadly isn't worth anything. It has to be on paper. They can make promises all day long, and unless it's on paper, it's not worth anything. So when we get rezonings or we get applications for construction of buildings, we have to take it with a grain of salt. They could get out there and get approved for the Dollar General and decide that they don't want to do the Dollar General, and then something else comes forward. We have to see if this fits. But their request to come off Hickory Ridge, it is a public road and is a valid request. So we have to take that into consideration. If we deny them on this, we better have a very good reason. Okay.
So then for all the members here, I'd like to bring your attention to what he just said. So for now on, when we're doing rezoning support or not supporting, that we need to have things when a builder says there's no way we're going to do X, Y, or Z, that we have them put it in writing with the rezoning application so that it is in writing and we're not having to take their word for it, because apparently some of the contractors' word is not as good as others.
I don't think even if it's in writing, you can hold them to them once that land is rezoned. And we have several people here I see in the audience that's running for county court that's in this room tonight. A lot of people don't realize, I touched on this last month. After 20 years on the county court, I've learned that's probably, that's one of the most important jobs that a county commissioner has, is the rezoning of any property. All this body does is recommend. We look at it according to the rules that the county commission has given us at that time. So it doesn't matter if we like it or not. If it meets the rules, you know, we didn't make those rules. But as a county commissioner, you have to look at this moving forward, because once it's rezoned, as long as they meet the rules that they set themselves, we can't do anything about it. We can turn it down, and then you can pay court cost when they take you to court, because there ain't no way to win it. You know, you can't, someone who follows the rules that we set, ain't no court in the world going to penalize them for that. You've got to take care of this stuff on the front end, not on the back end. It just don't work that way. I'm not lecturing, I'm just letting everybody here know the process, especially with so many people here in our audience that's running for county commission. Sam?
So to add to what he said and to clarify, when I said that things need to be in writing, for this particular situation, the only way to guarantee no road can go on to Hickory Ridge is if there was a deed restriction. And to force somebody to do that, you can request it, and if he's willing to get it passed to a rezoning by doing that, then that's the only way you can hold him to it, is having a deed restriction put in. Another thing that I would point out or bring up is you have 3 commercial lots in front of your subdivision, 3. Something is going to go there. Okay. This particular lot is being, the Dollar General that they're requesting to purchase is a substantial piece of that. So that limits the other portions. Ask yourself, is Dollar General or Dollar General Market a preferable option to some of the other options that could go there? It is a commercial lot, and they have a legitimate claim to access a public road. So Dollar General Market or some other potential business. That's the question.
Okay. Mayor, would you like to weigh in on this?
I believe Sam's right as far as any restriction. I think it would have to be a restrictive covenant in the deed that goes to the next property owner as far as to actually say you can't build on this road. I don't know that anything put in with a zoning requirement is going to hold up in court. I don't think that'll go. And plus, even if you did that, if the next property owner got it, so well, just because Bob said he wasn't going to do it doesn't mean I'm just held to it. So I do agree that that needs to be taken into consideration when we're looking at rezonings in the future. As far as all this, I would prefer it comes off Highway 25. I do know that there is a topography issue down there. I kind of hoped that it would go on the next track because the next track already has an access to the highway off of it. And I don't know if there'd been any discussion about maybe buying, just looking at it, if you cut a strip off of it, it's about 0.6 acres. And that would get you the road access, but I don't know if Mr. Ford is even interested in doing that. I don't know. That might have been something that's already addressed.
Like I said, I've went through all the options to minimize this. I listened to y'all's concerns. I have approached Mr. Ford about the property. It would cost them substantial amount of more money just to gain the access to that entrance. But requesting this particular site plan to maybe push that driveway to the edge of the property for the next business that comes in, that is an option because they will have the access to 25.
That would defeat the concerns of the subdivision, because then you've got not only the traffic for Market, but whatever comes in beside the Market, where that would already have access straight to 25. So having the connect through there is really just is compounding the problem.
There would be a potential, but there's also a potential that more of them would use the 25 exit too. So it could go either way.
And I would have to add that as much as it's going to cost to put a culvert and raise the grade to get the slope coming off 25 to their property, doing an entrance there, it's going to be almost that much having to do the same thing on either side of Hickory Ridge to widen those corners, as they've said they would, and what Bill said needed to be done for a semi to make that turn, that it's 6 1 half a dozen another the way it looks. But my understanding is that that Dollar General hasn't even looked at that. They went straight for what was the cheapest and easiest and didn't look into what it would actually cost or what was going to have to be done to do that. If you look at the site plan here and you look at the one they've built down in Castellian Springs, if you shifted, which is a Market also, if you were to shift this building to the other side of the lot and have the entrance coming in on the east side, just like the one there has it coming in on their west side, you would have the same layout and there'd be no objections. Talking with all the residents that I have, we would love to have Dollar General as a neighbor, because you look at any of the rural Dollar Generals, they're some of the cleanest properties you'll run across. It's the traffic flow coming in and out of there, and we know it's going to get worse because the city's growing and becoming more congested along 25. Now you put semi trucks trying to squeeze in and out of there, and you're compounding the problem.
Okay. Actually, with everything that's been said, my comment would be your issue's really with your developer, the neighborhood, not Dollar General and not this body. You know. All right. Any questions? Yes, sir. You got a question? You're gonna have to come up and speak in here so we can, got to remember, this is all going out on, what is it, Facebook? Push the button there, please. State your name so we can get you in the minutes.
Okay. Samuel Dunn, a resident of Hickory Ridge, but I own a trucking company and I've been a driver for 10 years. And I just don't see how you're going to widen it enough to make it where the traffic's not going to be backed up and accidents happen, you know? So I just didn't hear that clarified, so I just wanted to bring it
No,
up.
I'm glad you did, Sammy, and I knew who you were. We just need it for the record and everything.
Okay.
That's good to see, buddy.
You too. Yes, sir. So yeah, I mean, I'm just concerned with that, you know, I mean, have teenage daughters starting to drive.
Oh,
It's
Lord.
just, so it's like, just don't know how it's gonna play out.
I understand. I understand. Appreciate it. Okay. Any commission members have any questions for Sam, for Mary, or anybody going forward? No questions? Okay, the question now is up to you. Do I have a motion to approve this project?
I'd like to make a motion to not approve this project and to let them come back with a better site plan as far as the traffic coming in and out of the project.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second. It's motion, I'll second.
Well, good, you're a county commissioner, because if we go to court, you're going to be paying for it. All right, we have a motion and a second. Think about your vote. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say no. No. Let's make sure that the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. All against, please raise your hand. I don't think we can do we're not doing ourselves justice by forgetting our rules and stuff. I mean, I sympathize, but like I said, we didn't set these rules. We have to go by them. Do I have any other motions? Oh, that motion failed, by the way.
I make a motion to approve this request.
Have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Noller. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. Let's do hands one more time just to make sure. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, please raise your hand. It does pass. Okay, I believe that's the last thing on our agenda. Anything else to come before the Planning Commission tonight? Okay. Do you have a motion
to adjourn?
Okay. Motion by Mr. Noller to adjourn. Do I have a second? We are adjourned.